Back to another episode of the poker vlog. Today we have made it all the way out to the lodge. So you guys are like, oh wow, you guys are going to be doing the meetup game? Yes, that is not today's episode though. As you can see, it's pretty dark out and we are currently going to be heading out to play whatever we can get into. Again, most of these sessions end up being just that, where I try to figure out what the hell to play, but it takes a really long time to either find a seat or figure out exactly what we're playing. Anyways, we're here with the boys, Wolfie and Ethan, as well as Marcelo are up there. Their channels will be down below. But until then, let's get out of the dark and the dampness. Let's get some poker in.
So today's session is starting off as a friendly 1-3 game here against all the vloggers you guys know and love. If it's not enough that we're playing against Ethan, we're also playing against Alex Wolfgang Poker and Lex O. Starting things off, you know the shenanigans is going to be going crazy. There's a $6 straddle under the gun when Alex decides to raise to $20 from early position. Lexo's in the cutoff, who's directly to my right, and he decides just to make the call here. When we look down at ace-jack offsuit, look at this spot we found ourselves in. We decide to 3-bet here with position to $125. The effective stack in this hand is $2,000. Both Lexo and Wolfie have pretty large stacks. Folds back over to Alex, who decides to make the call. And Lexo gets out of the way, and we're heads up with one of my favorite people in the space, with a flop coming, Queen 5-4 Rainbow. Although it's not a great board texture for my exact hand, I'm going to be 3-betting with Queens plus, as well as Ace Queen plus in this spot very often. So this is a pretty standard C-bet for me when Alex decides to check it over to me. I decide to C-bet for $135, and Alex pretty reluctantly decides to fold his hand. He would later tell me that he did have a pocket pair, so happy we chose to play this a little more on the aggressive side. And look, I love Alex very much so, and although we are on the table battling, there's no one I'd rather hang out with than this man. Appreciate you, big dog. Well, that's enough of me kissing ass here. Unfortunately, they didn't pay me enough money to continue on, but this next hand is quite the mixy spot. The triple straddle is on. Yes, that is correct. That is 3 straddles pre-flop, and they're going to get even more ridiculous as the night goes along. Reason being is because we end up in a 5-10 super deep stack game, which ends up being a 5-10-20, and it goes all the way up to a $320 straddle. That's enough of me spoiling what goes on in the rest of this episode, and like I said, buckle up because this episode is an absolute crazy madhouse and pretty much the epitome of what it's like playing at the lodge. We look down at 6-7 of clubs here from the second straddle. We decide to just complete. The action is over to the third straddler, who decides to check his option. We are off to a flop. The flop comes absolute gin, or I guess scotch in some places, as it comes 8-5-4 Rainbow. We flop the absolute joint. We decide to check to continue playing in flow, and our opponent decides to bet $20. We pretty quickly decide to raise to $55, to which my opponent decides to make the call, and we are off to a turn card. The turn comes the jack of clubs, so now we add a flush draw to go along with our nuts. When it starts with me, I decide that I want to bet a pretty large sizing, considering there will be a couple of really oddball bluffs in my range here. And not only that, there needs to be a point we decide to get as much money in the middle as we can. Considering, again, we're playing a very deep stack game of poker, I think this is the right play. Unfortunately, my opponent does not agree with that statement, as he pretty quickly decides to lay his hand down. Unfortunate there, but like I said, what a wonderful way to start off the session. If you folks are enjoying the high stakes drama, make sure to drop a like. It takes over 20 hours to edit these videos, and it would do so much to help our community grow. At this point, we find ourselves in the 5-10-20 game, and we're looking to blast off and make ourselves a good bit of money. And just like that, we find ourselves in the 5-10 streets, as my name has been called to come up with the big boys. We look down at pocket threes here from middle position. I'm going to go ahead and raise to $40. It folds over to a friend of the vlog. Shout out to you. If I'm not mistaken, his name is Chris, and he's a lovely gentleman, a scholar, and a gent, and a great player at that. He's on the button, and he decides $40 is far too small of a price, and he decides to raise it up to $115 to go. Never going to be folding a pair here, considering how deep we are, which is an effective stack of around 4K. So we make the call, and we're off to a flop. The flop comes Jack, Deuce, Deuce, Rainbow. I decide to check it over to him, and he decides to check it back. When he checks back here, I'm almost 100% of the time putting him on a hand like Ace King, Ace Queen, Ace Jack, Ace 10, hands that have some form of showdown value that don't need to really bet to either bluff their way out of a better holding. They just want to get down to a cheaper showdown. So when that's the case and the turn comes a 5, it's about time that I start betting for some equity denial. The point of my bet here would be to get hands that are inferior to either call while they're behind or fold and get all of that extra equity out of the hand. I think the right sizing here is to go for $135 C bet, which I end up doing, and my opponent pretty quickly and begrudgingly decides to fold what he says is Ace Queen. So worked out perfectly in our favor there, and happy it did. In the very next hand, and I mean literally the very next hand, we're in a pretty fun spot. When you're in Texas, things that happen in Texas should continue to happen in Texas. So we have the double straddle on out there for $40. This game is playing massive. Middle position decides to limp here. The person on the button decides to limp as well, and it folds over to me in the double straddle, and I look down at Queen 10 of hearts. Oh my goodness. I feel like the weaker players will definitely just check this back, considering they're a little worried to play out of position in some aspects. But that's kind of the point of this. We want to isolate one of these two players. I'm already out of position, and the point is to get this hand this strong and get players to fold what could be some strong equity against us. I decide to raise it up to $250, and only the button decides to make the call, and we're off to a flop. The flop comes 10-4 deuce rainbow, and I'm in a pretty tricky situation. As opposed to betting as a c-bet for a bluff, I have a pretty strong hand that could actually do with some equity denial. Hands that are like King Queen or Queen Jack, Ace Queen, Ace Jack, King Jack, all have equity against us, and I want to give them the wrong price to draw. So I decide to bet a little bit on the larger size for $325. My opponent goes into the tank surprisingly. I thought this would be a pretty snap decision in either direction, but after quite a bit of time in the think tank, he decides to let his hand go. And luckily for us, a good flop for us, and we end up taking it down. And it's a friendly game, so we show the 10 of hearts. Who knows what the other hand is? Well, now you know. It was a Queen of Hearts. Let's see if we can't make this third hand in a row. We find ourselves in the single straddle situation. When middle position decides to raise it up to $60, the cutoff decides to make the call as well as the small blind. And we look down at 9-5 of spades. It's going to be hard to win this pot, I think, with this hand, but pretty much any suited card that I'm looking here, 4 ways, I'm getting a pretty good price to make this call on my money. So that's what I go ahead and do, and we're off to a flop. And it just seems like today's the day. Today's the day where you might as well buy a lotto ticket as we flop the third nuts. The flop comes Ace, King, 10, 3 spades. Oh my gosh. And sure, I can't discount Queen, Jack of spades or Jack, 8 of spades from some of these opponents, but in reality, I'm pretty confident in my hand, especially because there's an ace and a king of spades out there. I go ahead and check to continue playing in flow. The middle position player decides to c-bet here for $60, a really small sizing. The recreational player here from the cutoff decides to raise it up to $260. When it's back onto me, I think overplaying my hand would definitely include me raising, so I'm going to go ahead and just make the call here and allow my entire opponent's range to continue. The initial raiser decides to just make the call, and we're off to a turn card. The turn card comes at 3 of hearts, changing absolutely nothing. When I go ahead and check, unfortunately, the action checks all the way through. And I'm just praying for nobody to pair the board. And sadly, that is exactly what the dealer does, as the river comes an ace of diamonds. I decide to check here, considering I never have a leading range on this river. There's just literally no way I can do it. And to no surprise, the initial raiser decides to bet here for $1,800, a massive overbet to the pot. The cutoff player decides to fold what I believe seeing was King Queen. And now the action is back onto me. I think about it for quite a long time before deciding on making the hero call. No, I'm not. We're a changed man and we make responsible laydowns. So we decide to lay our hand down. It's unfortunate, but you know, it's a bad run out. And what can you do? You just have to make the fold. I just don't think that this player is going to be sick enough to be betting 3x or 2x pot on the river with anything that is not a boat. I mean, I'd be blown away. If he can have ace queen there, then, you know, all goodness to you if you can have ace queen with the queen of spades. But in reality, I just highly doubt it. I just don't know how he can end up there with anything less than a boat. Just before we get into these next hands that become even more ridiculous than what you guys have seen to this point, I want to ask you guys to head over to the link in the description, which is a Telegram link, to get you guys signed up on the Splash Squads over on Club GG. It's the only place you can play with myself, Johnnievibes, Rampage, Mariano, and Allin. We're constantly mixing it up on the virtual felt. It's a really easy process to get you guys loaded up. If you guys have any questions, please make sure to follow over that Telegram link. They'll help you guys out. They have a 24/7 support team, and it's super simple. Let's get back to today's video because, like I said, there's even more ridiculous spots as we get through this session. Well, as I said, the things that happen in Texas seem to just be bigger and more ridiculous, and the next thing follows suit. PLO bomb pots are a regular thing here, and we're off 8 ways or 9 ways to a flop with our pretty terrible hand, which is Queen of Hearts, 8 of Clubs, 10-3 of Spades. But it's not so bad when we see the flop. The flop on the top board comes King 8 deuce with 2 spades, and on the bottom board we flop trips with the queen kicker being 3-3-6. The button decides to take over the reins of the hand by betting $80. I make the call, and next tack makes the call, and we're off to a turn card. The turn on the top board comes a 6 of clubs, and the turn on the bottom board gives us a boat, which is a queen of diamonds. I decide to take over the reins in the hand this time around, and I lead out for $250. Next to act makes the call, and the button pretty quickly decides to get out of the way. The rivers come a deuce of hearts and a 7 of diamonds. At this point, I want to get all chopping hands to make the fold, so I want to go for a massive sizing. I decide to bet the pot, so a very large sizing, and luckily for me, we don't have a long sweat as the opponent pretty quickly decides to fold. I don't think I was good on the top board considering I only had a pair of 8s. We ended up breaking out our flush draw, but pretty nice spot to get a little bit of a semi bluff, or I guess a halfway bluff through. It's easier when you have a boat on one of the boards. This next hand is something we discussed early in the session, and yes, that is right. We're not playing 5-10 or 5-10-20 or 5-10-40, 80, 160, but we're playing 320. 5, 10, 20, 40, 80, 160, 320 straddles. We look down from the button at pocket aces. Oh my goodness. I don't even know how to play this, to be quite honest. We have $4,000 in our stack. I really don't even know how to play it. I'm not even exaggerating. So in these straddles, there's no GTO book to help you. And in reality, we have like 12 big blinds in this spot. So I decide to just jam, considering I have like, I don't know, 15 or 12 big blinds in this spot. My goal is to try to have somebody that just overthinks it and just puts in the call. It could look like I'm just trying to steal the pot, which is really what I'd be doing with like any ace in this spot, I guess. After quite a long tank from our friend Chris, he decides to lay down pocket 7s, and we end up winning over $500 pre-flop. You know, we can't complain about it. It's pretty awesome. It's just unfortunate that we couldn't get any more money. Looking back, I'm going to be quite honest with you guys. Look, I don't know what the perfect way to play this is, but I wish I didn't jam, obviously. I wish I just pretty much min clicked or made it like $700 and made somebody else jam over that. But I don't know. There's just no book on how to do these crazy spots, and considering I'm not from Texas, not in situations like this often. Maybe I just got panicked or just overreacted in a spot where I could have made more money. But hey, you live and you learn. Next time I'm in the lodge, I'll know what to expect. So this next hand, we are catching up as the hand is progressing. So it's my job to let you guys in on everything that's happening. Briefly, my goal is not to show you guys a bunch of PLO bomb pots. I realize that PLO is not something that's really fun or exciting for most vlog watchers. I realize that you guys like No Limit Holdem, but whenever there's a massive pot, I've got to show it, and this is a massive, massive pot. We look down at ace 5-7, triple diamonds, and a straggling jack. When we end up on a flop that comes 10-3-6 and 4-3-9. So we flop ourselves the nut flush draw on the top board, and on the bottom board, we have a gut shot straight draw. The flop luckily checks through, so I'll be able to realize some of my equity. And the turn card comes a queen on the top board and a 10 of clubs on the bottom board. So this becomes very, very wet, and we now pick up even more equity on both of these boards. We add an extra straight draw on the top board to the nuts, as well as on the bottom board, we pick up an extra straight draw with our 5-7. The small blind decides to lead here for $100. I make the call, and the button decides to pot it here to $700. The action is now on to me, and I decide to make the call, considering we still can make the nuts on all of these boards. The river comes a king on the top board and a third club on the bottom board. I now know for a fact that I have the nuts on one board, meaning I can at least win half of the pot. On the bottom board, I have nothing, absolutely nothing. And when that's the case, what I've watched Brad Owen do is just go, bonanza in these spots. And that's what I'm going to do. I decide to lead out for pot here for a massive bet of $1,800 because that is the pot size bet. My opponent goes deep into the tank before exposing pocket queens for a flop top set on the top board. So we haven't beat on that board, but on the second board, he does have a pair. After a long tank, he does not have clubs for the flush on the bottom board and ends up folding what would have been the tying hand. Aggression has paid off yet again in this session. Let's go. To this point, honestly, we haven't been put in any super ridiculous spots on the river. In this next hand, we find ourselves in the triple straddle for $80. It folds over to the big blind, who decides to raise for $250. The $40 straddler decides to make the call, and I look down at ace-7 of diamonds. I mean, can we have asked for a better hand in the straddle? I mean, to be honest, if we did, it'd probably be unfair. So I decide to make the call, considering somehow we are in position against all these players. And we're off to a flop that comes ace-5 king with 2 spades and a diamond. There is a c-bet here from the player in the big blind to $350. I will let you guys know that the player that is in the big blind is somebody that loves to get into the mix of things. $2,000 flips that were blind happen very frequently with this player, and he was here to mix things up. No, we're not talking about mixing it up. I think that's one of the players that plays on the lodge. But when it folds over to me, I don't think I have any other decision besides just calling here. And that's what I go ahead and do. $350 to go, and we're off to a turn card that comes at 3 of clubs. Our opponent decides to double barrel to $450. If I was good on the flop, I can't imagine that I'm bad on this turn card. And if I am, the board can still pair to bail me out against every other ace. So when that's the case, and considering how likely my opponent is to bluff, I decide to just make the call. And we are off to a river looking to improve, or at least not face a massive bet. And the river comes a 5 of diamonds. Luckily now we improved to 2 pair with a king kicker. So I don't think I can be folding for any price on this river. When my opponent leads out for $900, I think this is the easiest call we've had in our entire session. I decide to make the call fairly quickly. We don't need to Hollywood whatsoever. I am not here to slow roll anyone. And my opponent shows pocket 9s. What an outstanding situation for us as we caught off a triple barrel bluff in a massive pot, bringing in over a $3,500 pot back home to Los Angeles.
So we're now back in the Airbnb, but I didn't let you guys know how we did. The session ended up going pretty well. As you guys saw, not a lot went down, but when we did get into pots, it ended up being pretty big. 5-10 here in Texas plays more like a 10-25 or even 25-50, as you guys saw, with the $320 straddle at some points. Anyways, we ran like as good as possible. We were into today's game for 3,100 and out for 7K exactly. Cannot complain about making money, so that's pretty much it. If you guys like the content, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Enjoy yourselves, have a nice day, and stay safe. Doses.